Hi, ship gardeners! Today we're planting kale two ways. We'll be planting kale microgreens, which are little baby sprouts that we're going to clip and eat small. And we're planting kale seedlings, which are baby kales, which we'll then transplant into a bigger pot and let it grow big and turn into a big kale. But before we get started on that, let's check our plantings from last week. Is your potato coming up? Mine is not quite coming up, but if I carefully poke around and look at my potato, I can actually see some roots in there. And so that's a good sign. I know my potato is going to sprout. So I'm covering that back up with soil. You probably don't want to poke around at your potato. You'll just know that yours does have roots growing around in there, but we don't want to disturb those roots too much. So once your potato does come up, remember we're going to put it in a really sunny window or outside if it's warm enough for it. What about your bean? Is your bean coming up? My bean is just barely coming up. I can just finally today see a little piece of kind of white stem starting to poke up, and the bean seed looks like it's poking up out of the soil almost, but I bet by tomorrow I'll have a sprout. But if you're wondering how your bean is doing under there, you can check your germination test. And let's see what is going on under there. Aha! So my biggest bean has a very long root coming out, and you could see that the little leaf that's curled up inside the seed is just about to pop out. And those are called the cotyledon or seed leaves. And those are the first leaves that are curled up inside the seed, and then they pop out and they turn green and start to photosynthesize. But they are not the true leaves. The first true leaves will pop out after that. So why do you think that the root comes out of the seed first instead of the leaves? Do you think it might need to go down into the soil and find water? If it finds water, then the whole rest of the process can keep going. I think I'll put mine back in my germination paper. That way I can watch and see what's happening to my bean. So since I can start to see some of my bean coming up, I'm going to make sure I put this either into a sunny window or right outside if it's nice and warm. Okay, let's get started planting our kale. So kale is an amazing leafy green superfood. It's full of fiber and it has vitamins and minerals. It has vitamin A and K and B6 and C, and it has calcium, potassium, copper, and manganese. So those are minerals. Kale is super nutritious as a microgreen, and it also can grow into a big, huge plant where we eat the leaves. What actually is a microgreen? A microgreen is when we plant little tiny kale seeds, a whole bunch of them all together in the pot, and we let them grow only 1 to 2 weeks. The little seedlings are just going to get this big, and then we're going to cut them with our scissors and we'll eat them as a snack right then. So let's get our pots ready. Let's fill them with soil. Take your small bag of soil and make sure it feels nice and moist. You can go ahead and moisten it a little bit with some water. And kind of stir that around, and then we'll fill our pots. So we're filling 1 peat pot that's pint-sized for the microgreens, and then we're going to fill our 3 teeny tiny peat pots, and this will be for the kale seedlings that we're going to transplant later. So after we fill our pots with soil, we press down gently just to make sure the soil is settled in there. Microgreens are so easy to grow. We're just going to take most of our seeds. We'll leave a few in there for our kale seedlings. I'm leaving some seeds in my envelope. And the rest of the seeds we're just going to sprinkle across the top of our pot. I'm putting my seeds in so that they're almost touching each other, but not quite. Now you're going to press your seeds down with your fingers into the soil to make sure that the seeds make contact with the soil so they can start soaking up moisture. But for microgreens, we do not cover the seeds. That's just so the microgreens don't get too dirty as they grow. Then we just take our mister and give it a nice good misting. Then we're going to find some kind of saucer to put the plant on to catch water. And now all it needs is a tag, the kale microgreens and the date. And I bet you know what to do next, right? We're going to take one of your paper bags and we're going to use it as a little grow tent. This is going to keep the moisture inside and keep it nice and dark for the microgreens. This is important because we didn't cover the surface of those seeds with more soil. And we're going to check this every single day. We'll give it some spritzing with our mister, and then we're going to put the growing tent back on. Now, the first time that you see your little microgreens starting to come up and sprout, leave the bag on one more day. That will let those microgreens keep growing down and putting their roots into the ground and getting a little bit more sturdy. Then you can take the bag off the next day and you can spritz them again, and then just let them grow in a nice sunny window. These microgreens will be ready to eat in about 1 to 1.5 weeks. You can grow microgreens out of so many different seeds. You can use other kinds of cruciferous seeds. Kale is in the cruciferous plant family, which means it's in the cabbage family, along with turnips and arugula and radishes. All of those kinds of seeds make wonderful microgreens. Also lettuce or basil or sunflowers or peas. Okay, next up is our kale seedlings. So take your same kale envelope, and these are going to be little baby kale plants that we grow, and we'll put them into a bigger pot. Let's just make a little indentation in each of these 3 pots. And why don't we put 2 or 3 seeds in each hole? You can save the rest of your kale seeds. Okay, we're going to sprinkle a little bit of soil on top of each of these seeds, maybe about 1/4 inch, and we'll press that down gently. So now we've planted those tiny seeds about 1/4 of an inch deep. These aren't microgreens, so they'll like having some nice soil on top to keep them moist. And then we'll spritz it with our spritzer. Now these little pots, because they're small, they will dry out faster, so you will have to definitely spritz these every single day, because there's lots of air flowing around these little pots and they're going to get more dry. All right, we'll stick them on a saucer, and you can actually put some water in the saucer too to help them stay moist, and they'll soak that up from the bottom. Should we make a tag? And let's go ahead and put a growing tent on top to keep the moisture in. But the main thing is to make sure as soon as you see little baby sprouts coming up, the smallest, tiniest sprout, put them in a sunny window so they can start photosynthesizing. And then you'll take your bag off at that point. You can put your kale seedlings outside if you'd like them to get some good sunlight, but you'll have to really make sure you water them probably even twice a day. As your plants start to get a little bit bigger and start using up more water each day, you might want to switch to watering them with a pitcher or a cup instead of the mister so they get enough water. And also that's good for the microgreens once they get a little bit big so that they don't get moldy from the misting. In the next week or 2, when these kale plants have not just their baby seed leaves or cotyledon leaves, but a couple of true leaves growing, we will transplant them out of these teeny tiny pots, and we'll have to make ourselves a recycled pot. So I'm saving aside this milk carton, and I'm going to cut it and we'll poke holes in it, and next time we'll be able to use our recycled pot for our kale planting. So let's talk for just a minute about hardening off. Hardening off is when we get plants that have been growing indoors used to moving outdoors. And we have to get plants used to that little by little, because outside there's a lot of wind and strong sunlight and more swings in temperatures, colder temperatures, warmer temperatures. So it's a good idea to give them a couple of hours outside and then bring them inside again, and then increase the amount of time that they have outside. That way they will get stronger stems and leaves and be able to handle the wind and the sun and the temperatures outside. The last frost date in our area of Virginia is around April 10th. Your bean and your potatoes do not like frost. So you have to keep your eye on the weather a little bit, especially the temperatures at night. If it's going to drop down below 40 or anywhere near 32, which is freezing, make sure you bring in your bean and your potato so they don't freeze. All right, great job everyone. I can't wait to see how all of your plants are growing next week. Have a great week and see you next time. Bye.